this month, today, we're going to be talking about verse 28 of Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. In many previous verses, Bhagavan has made reference to the practice of self-investigation, but in this verse, he is describing the practice in more detail. This verse consists of one long sentence and just a single word. So it's, virtually the whole verse is one sentence. In the main sentence, to make it easier to explain, I'll break it up into parts. The first phrase is a noun phrase, an accusative noun phrase. That is eṛumbum, ahandai, eṛumiḍattai. That means idam is a place. Ahandai eṛumiḍum is the place where ego rises. eṛumbum ahandai means the ego which rises, or the rising ego. So eṛumbum ahandai eṛumiḍattai means the rising place of the rising ego, the place from which the rising ego rises. But that is the first phrase in the sentence. Then comes an analogy, which I'll skip over for the time being. Then then he gives what is the means by which we investigate, kūrnda matiyāl. That means kūrnda means a sharp or keen mind or intellect or power of attention. Then again, I'll skip over the next clause just so we just get the main structure of the sentence. Uڵḷadu means sinking within. Aṛiya vēṇḍum means it is necessary to know. So the main structure of the sentence, omitting the analogy and some subsidiary clauses, is eṛumbum ahandai eṛumiḍattai kūrndamati uڵḷadu aṛiya vēṇḍum. That means it is necessary to know the place where the ego, I've said a different way. Sinking within by means of a keen mind, a sharpened mind, it is necessary to know the place where the rising ego rises. Here, when Bhagavan talks about the place where ego rises, obviously he's not talking about a place in time and space. He's using the word idam, place, in a metaphorical sense. So the place from which the ego rises is the thing from which the ego rises. What does the ego rise from? Ego rises from ourself. There's no other place where ego could arise. It arises from ourself. That is from our real nature, which is pure awareness. Ego rises. So in order to know that source, that place from which ego rises, in other words, in order to know our real nature, we need to sink deep within. And the means to sink deep within is kūrndamati. Kūrndamati, kūrnda is a relative participle that means sharpened, pointed, keen, acute, penetrating, and in effect it means a very keenly discerning mind or intellect. In other words, with a very keen power of attention, we need to sink deep within and know the place from which ego rises. That is, we have to turn our attention very keenly within towards ourself alone in order to know our real nature, which is that from which we rise as ego. To further clarify this, Bhagavan uses to clarify, that is, clarify the sinking within. He uses an analogy. Nīril, viṛunda, poruļ, kāṇa, vēṇḍi, muṛuhudalpōṭ. That means like sinking, wanting to see something that has fallen in water. Vēṇḍi literally means wanting or needing, but in effect it means in order to. So like sinking in order to see something that has fallen in water, to see, or to, kāṇa means to see. It is used here in the sense of to find. In order to find something that has fallen in water, just as we would sink, we'd have to dive into the water. In order to find something that's fallen there, we need to dive deep into ourselves. Dive again, or sink. The word muṛuhudal and eṛumbu, they can mean diving, they can also mean sinking, submerging. Again, these are metaphorical. Bhagavan uses these in a metaphorical sense. That is, we have to go below the surface activity of the mind, deep into the core of our being, deep within ourselves, in order to know what we actually are. What is meant by going deep within is withdrawing our attention from all other things, all external phenomena. All phenomena are on the surface of the mind, so to speak. And in order to, we need to leave behind all phenomena, as Bhagavan says in verse 16 of Upadeshundiya, Veli vidayangale vittu. That means leaving all external phenomena. What he says there is, Veli vidayangale vittu, manam tan oli muṛuhudal undi para, unme unityam undi para. That means leaving aside all external phenomena, the mind knowing its own form of light is true awareness or true knowledge. The leaving behind of all phenomena is what Bhagavan describes as sinking deep within. That is, the more we draw our attention from everything else and focus our attention on ourselves, other things will recede into the background in our awareness, and we will, metaphorically speaking, be sinking deep within ourselves. So it's that withdrawing ourselves away from all external phenomena, that is what Bhagavan calls sinking within. So just as we would sink deep into water in order to find something that's fallen there, we need to sink deep within ourselves. And how do we sink deep within ourselves? Kūrndamati, by a keen mind or intellect. That is, in other words, a keen attention. Attention on what? Attention on ourselves, because we are the source from which we have risen as ego. And then there's just one other clause that Bhagavan has included in this verse, which is pēccu mūccu aḍakki-k-koṇḍu. That means restraining speech and breath. That comes immediately after matiyāl. So what Bhagavan implies here is that by this keen self-attentiveness, we not only sink deep within, we also restrain the speech and breath. In other words, it is not necessary. Bhagavan isn't asking us to make an effort to restrain the speech and breath, because if we're trying to restrain the speech and breath, our attention are on them, not on ourselves. by focusing our attention on ourselves, automatically our speech and breath will be restrained. So there's no need for any exercises of pranayama or trying to keep vocal silence. We simply have to turn our attention back towards ourselves. The more keenly we turn our attention towards ourselves, the more it will be withdrawn from all other things. And when our attention is withdrawn from other things, the speech is automatically controlled and the breathing is automatically controlled. In the case of Bhagavan, when he had that fear of death as a 16-year-old boy, he was so keen to know whether when this body dies, will I also die? So he was so keen to know, what is the I? What is this I? Is it something that will die along with the body, or is it something separate from the body? So he focused his attention so keenly on himself, but actually his body lay there lifeless for 20 minutes. In many books, it's given the impression that Bhagavan enacted death, but he lay down and enacted death. But it wasn't like that. He did lay down, but he lay down in order to turn his attention within, and he turned his attention within so keenly that the breath automatically subsided. So his body was actually lying there lifeless for 20 minutes, and then suddenly it came back to life again, because it was that body had a divine function to fulfill, that is to live for another 54 years in order to teach us this path of self-investigation and self-surrender. So the whole of this sentence is eṛumbum ahandai eṛumiḍattai nīril viṛunda poruḻkāṇa vēṇḍi muṛuhudalpōṯ kūrndamati pēccu mūccu aḍakki-k-koṇḍu uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. We can rearrange it, because this is not in poetry. Often the clauses and words are switched around in a way that is not natural to the natural prose order. So if we arrange it into a more natural prose order, it is first comes the analogy. Nīril, viṛunda, poruļkāṇa, vēṇḍi, muṛuhudalpōṯ. And then comes the main clause, eṛumbum ahandai eṛumiḍattai kūrndamati pēccu mūccu aḍakki-k-koṇḍu uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. That is, like sinking, wanting to see something that has fallen in water, sinking within, restraining speech and breath by a sharpened mind, it is necessary to know the place where the rising ego rises. If we sink into water in order to find something, we will restrain our speech and breath, because we can't go under the water if we're still breathing, because we will take water into our lungs. So, but in the case of sinking into water, we need to deliberately hold our breath. Whereas in the case of sinking within ourselves, we don't need to deliberately hold our breath, because the breath will automatically be restrained by the keenness of our self-attentiveness. The breath will automatically be restrained. When describing the receiving of a shocking news, we sometimes say it took my breath away, because when the mind is very concentrated on something, if something happens to give us a shock, our breath stops at that moment. That's why we say that something shocking took our breath away. That means at that moment we stop breathing. Likewise, if our mind is very keenly focused on ourselves, the breathing and the speech will stop automatically. So we don't have to, Bhagavan isn't asking us to attend to the speech and breath. He's asking us The keen mind must be, in order to sink deep within, the mind must be focused keenly on ourselves. In the Kalivemba version, Bhagavan adds one more word to this sentence. At the beginning of the sentence, he adds the word munna. Munna means before, it's an adverb. It means before, in advance, or in front of. And he added it before the first two words, eṛumbu mahandai, the rising ego, or the ego which rises. So what he indicated by this word is that the ego is what rises before everything else. Other things rise only after we have risen as ego. As he says in a couple of verses earlier, the verse we discussed back in March, ahandai undayin anatum undahum, ahandai indrel indru anatum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego does not exist, everything does not exist. So the ego is the first thing to rise. Only after ego rises, other things rise. So along with this Kalivemba extension, this additional word, this sentence is munna eṛumbum ahandai eṛumiḍattai nīril viṛunda poruḻkāṇa vēṇḍi muṛuhudalpōṯ kūrnda matiyāl pēccu mūccu aḍakki-k-koṇḍu uḻḷē yāṛndaṟiya vēṇḍum. That means, like seeking, wanting to see something that has fallen in water, sinking within, restraining speech and breath by a sharpened mind, it is necessary to know the place where the ego, which rises before everything else is understood there, which rises before, rises. So the place where this ego, which rises before everything else, where does this ego rise? All other things rise, everything appears, all phenomena appear only when we appear as ego. So from where do we appear as ego? From what is the source from which this ego rises? That is what we need to investigate. As I say, he uses the analogy here of sinking in water. This is, he uses the same analogy but in a slightly, in the 11th paragraph of Nāna, but there he doesn't talk about something that's fallen in water. There he talks about, just like pearl divers dive into the ocean to retrieve a pearl. So because he's using the same analogy, it's relevant to read this portion of the 11th paragraph of Nāna in this context. That is, in the first sentence of this paragraph, Bhagavan says, "Manatin kan edu varil vishaya vasanegal irkindrana vo adu varil nana ennum vicharane vendum." That means, as long as vishaya vasanas exist within the mind, so long is the investigation who am I necessary. Vishaya vasanas means our inclinations or desires to experience other things. So all our desires, but these are the desires that draw our mind out towards Vishaya. Vishaya means phenomena. Everything other than ourselves is a Vishaya. So, and that is what we need. We need to let go of our desire and attachment for these things. So, but our desires and attachments for these things in the seed form are called Vishaya vasanas. So as long as these Vishaya vasanas exist within the mind, that is, so long as our mind has a taste, has a liking to go out towards anything other than itself, so long it's necessary for us to persevere in this investigation, who am I? And then in the next sentence he says, Ninivugal tondra tondra, apode kapode, avegale elam, upatistanatilaye vicharanayal nasipika vendum. That means as and when thoughts appear, then and there it is necessary to annihilate them all by vicharana. Vicharana means the same as vichara, in the very place from which they rise. So as and when thoughts appear, we have to be turning our attention, we have to be holding fast to ourselves, and thereby destroying the thoughts as they rise. We don't have to be waiting for thoughts to rise in order to destroy them. If we cling firmly to ourselves and don't allow ourselves to be swayed by the vasanas but are tending to draw our mind outwards, that is destroying the thoughts, because we're destroying the seeds of the thoughts. The seeds that give rise to thoughts are the Vishaya vasanas. So by clinging firmly to self-attentiveness, we are not feeding the Vishaya vasanas, and thereby we are weakening them and eventually eradicating them. So that's the first two sentences. Then in the next sentence, he talks about vairagya. Vairagya, raga means passion or desire. Viraga is the opposite. It's the freedom from the desirelessness. Vairagya is the quality of having viraga, of having freedom from desire. So vairagya, and another term he uses for vairagya is nirasa, nirase, which means desirelessness. So in this sentence he says, anyate nada dirital vairagyam uڵḷadu nirasa. That is, he's defining here what is vairagya or nirasa. What is dispassion or detachment or desirelessness. What it is, he says, anyate nada dirital. That literally means being without seeking or without attending to anything other than ourselves. In other words, not attending to anything other than ourselves, that is vairagya. And then in the next sentence, he defines jnana. Jnana means true awareness. Tanne vida dirital jnanam. That is not leaving oneself, not letting go of oneself, is jnana. And then he says, unmeil eṛumbum andre. In truth, the two are only one. That means vairagya and jnana are one and the same thing. Then in the next sentence, this is the sentence that is relevant to the to this verse. He describes why vairagya is necessary, and in order to describe that, he gives this analogy of the pearl diver. Muttu kulipo tam ideil kalle kati koṇḍu murhi kade adil kidekum muteye epidi edukindra epidi edukira galo apadiye ovvaruvernum vairagya tudan tannul andu murhi atmamute adeyalam. That means just as pearl divers tying stones to their waist and sinking pick up pearls that are found at the bottom of the sea, so each one sinking deep within oneself with vairagya may attain the pearl of oneself. That is, may attain the atmamuttu, means the pearl that is oneself. So how do we attain this pearl? By sinking deep within ourselves. And how do we sink deep within ourselves? With vairagya. That is, so long as we have desire or attachment for anything other than ourselves, so long as we have a taste to attend to anything other than ourselves, that will keep us floating on the surface of the mind. We won't be able to dive deep because we're unwilling to let go of all of other things. So in order to sink deep within ourselves, in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to be ready to let go of everything else. And that willingness to let go of everything else, that is what is called vairagya or nirasa. So we have to have, so just like the pearl divers, in order to sink deep enough to get the pearls, they need to tie a stone to their waist. For us to sink deeper enough within ourselves, in order to know ourselves, we have to tie this stone of vairagya, this stone of freedom from desire, to attend to or be aware of anything other than ourselves. So that's the sentence that's most relevant to this verse. But while we're at it, we may as well just finish this paragraph, because every sentence in this paragraph is very important to the practice. In the next sentence, he says, Oruvun tan sarupate adeyam varayal nirantara swarupa smaranaye Oruvan tan surupate adeyam varayal nirantara surupa smaranaye kaipatru vanayin adu andre podum. That means if one clings fast to uninterrupted swarupa smarana until one attains swarupa, that alone is sufficient. Swarupa means one's own form, literally, but it implies one's own real nature. So until one attains one's real nature, in other words, until we are firmly established as we really are, so until we remain, until we know what we actually are, and thereby remain as we actually are, until such time, if we cling to uninterrupted swarupa smarana. Swarupa smarana means self-remembrance, or remembrance of our own real nature. In other words, swarupa smarana is just another way of describing self-attentiveness. We cling fast to uninterrupted self-attentiveness until we attain our real nature. Adu andre podum. That alone is sufficient. That's a great assurance Bhagavan gives us. No other practice is necessary. If we just try to cling tenaciously to self-attentiveness, that alone is sufficient. And then in the next sentence, he gives an analogy. So long as enemy kotayil edirigal ulla varayil adilirindu velie vandu kondu pargal. That means so long as enemies are within the fort, they will be continually coming out from it. Vara vara abagalaye elam vetti konde eṛundal kote kai vasapadam. That means if one continuously cutting them down or destroying them as and when they come, the fort will eventually be captured. So Bhagavan is just is using an analogy here, but what this analogy means, the enemies are the Vishaya vasanas. The fort is our own heart. So long as we still have Vishaya vasanas residing within us, they will be continually coming out in the form of thoughts. So if we continually cut them down, how do we cut them down? As he said in the second sentence, by vichara, that is by clinging firmly to self-attentiveness. If we thereby continually cut them down as and when they come, the fort, namely our heart, will eventually be captured. In other words, it's a metaphorical way Bhagavan is saying it, but it means we will eventually be established in our real nature. To return now to this verse, as I said, all this verse is one long sentence except for one final word. That final word is ari. He says in the long sentence, it's necessary to know the place where the ego rises. And then he ends by saying ari. Ari means know. Or in this context, it means know here in the sense of be aware. When he talks about knowing the place where I rise it, that means being aware of our real nature, being aware of ourselves as we actually are. That is what we need to know. And we know it by sinking within with a keen attention. That means a keen power of it, keen self-attentiveness. By sinking within with a keen self-attentiveness, we should know the source from which we have risen. And then he ends the verse by saying, Ari, know, or be aware of this. Be aware of yourself as you actually are, is the implication. So I think, I hope I've explained that adequately. So if you have any questions.
Thank you, Michael. I just have to make one comment. When we are translating, because sometimes we lose the intent of the sentence or word used. At least in my language, nirasa means hopelessness, not desirelessness.
Okay.
Yeah,
in Tamil it's used in, but asa is desire. So nirasa is desirelessness. It's in that sense Bhagavan is using it here.
And the second thing is about the breath, restraining the breath. If I remember correctly, Upadesh Undiyar, I think either 9th or 10th verse uses manolaya in reference to manolaya and the connection with the breath. So I think my own feeling is even though Jnana Yoga or Bhakti Yoga are useful practices and more rewarding practices, I don't think we can ignore and say japa is no good, some other method of
everything is useful at its own level. But if we want to go deep within, then we have to leave, because all the practice of self-investigation is self-attentiveness. We're attending only to ourselves. Any practice other than that, we're attending to something other than ourselves. So long as we're attending to something other than ourselves, we cannot sink sufficiently deep within ourselves. That is why all other practices are necessary for gaining the required purity of mind. Purity of mind means the freedom from the weakening of our Vishaya. The Vishaya vasanas are the impurities in our mind. So to the extent that we reduce the strength of our Vishaya vasanas, to that extent our mind is purified. So in the early stages, when we don't have a taste for this self-investigation and self-surrender, other practices are helpful, because they can help us to wean our mind away from its attachments. But in order to let go of the attachments entirely, we have to attend only to ourselves. That is the path of self-investigation. So ultimately, all other practices have to be left behind. It doesn't mean they're not useful at their own time. But in order to reach our goal, it's if you're traveling from Chennai to Tiruvannamalai to visit Bhagavan Shrine, you can take a bus, which will get you as far as the Tiruvannamalai bus stand. Then you can get a rickshaw, which will take you up to the gate of the ashram. But once you reach the gate of the ashram, in order to get from the bus stand to the ashram, you have to leave the bus and get in the rickshaw. Once you reach the gate of the ashram, you have to leave the rickshaw and you have to go by foot in order to enter into the shrine. So practices which are useful at certain stages, as we advance, we have to leave them behind.
True. I totally agree with you, because it is a multi-step process, and one of the steps at a time you take in order to reach the goal, the destination. In that process, my own feeling is just as to dive into the water in order to get the paddle, one has to restrain a breath. That's one step.
Yes.
Similarly, I think if I interpret it right, and at least in my own opinion, my own practice, I find enormous benefit is the word, the the breathing exercises that are recommended is a prelude. It's not the destination. It is just a step in order to, at multiple level, the whole purpose of prayer, at least from what I understand, is to control the mind. I mean, you're a God, the unknown, the supreme. Give me, God, the ability to control my mind. That is the essence of our own prayers. So in the case, this breathing exercise is a prelude, so to speak, in the process for calming the mind and controlling the mind.
Yes. For people who have a taste for that sort of thing, that can certainly be helpful up to a certain point. But if we're going to dive deep within, we do have to control our speech and breath. But if we try to control them by deliberately controlling them, then our attention is on something other than ourselves, because the prana, the breath, is something other than ourselves. So long as our attention is on anything other than ourselves, we cannot go sufficiently deep within, because all things other than ourselves, all phenomena, are on the surface of the mind. So long as we are concentrating on controlling the breath, our attention is not entirely on ourselves. So ultimately, what Bhagavan means by kūrndamati, he says a sharp mind. He doesn't specify it there, but what he implies by kūrndamati is a keenly focused self-attention, self-attentiveness. So it's by that keenly focused self-attentiveness that we should control the speech and breath. That is the important point here. So Bhagavan isn't, at earlier stages, controlling the breath by means of pranayama, by doing so deliberately, may be helpful. But when we reach this stage where we want to dive deep within to retrieve that atma-muṛtu, that pearl of self, we have to be ready to let go of everything else. So we have to focus our attention only on ourselves. But if we focus our attention only on ourselves, the breath and speech will automatically be controlled. So we don't have to be concerned about controlling our speech and breath. It's something that will just happen automatically.
Yes.
Is that clear?
Yes.
Yeah. But it's good you raised that, because this is a point that people can easily think that at that stage it's still necessary to control the breath. Yes, it is necessary to control the breath, but not by any exercises of pranayama, simply by the self-attentiveness. So by your asking that, it enables us to, these things we need to din into our minds again and again in order to get a very clear understanding. Yes. Hi. Namaskaram.
So I'm wondering, you said the very nature of attention seems to be outward, because I am able to attend to my breath. I am able to attend to, if I say, oh, Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramana, whatever, like chanting, whatever. I am, so attention cannot attend to itself. Like it cannot say, because the very nature of attention is outward. Like I can attend to everything but myself.
Well, there's some truth in what you say, but it's not entirely true. The very nature of ego is to attend to things other than itself. Because as Bhagavan says in verse 25, Urupatri undam, urupatri nekum, urupatri undu mehaongam. That he's describing the ego. It comes into existence grasping form. It stands by grasping form. And it flourishes abundantly by feeding on by grasping and feeding on form. What he means there by urupatri, grasping form, is attending to things other than ourselves. That is the very nature of the ego. Ego cannot survive without clinging to things other than itself. So in this practice of self-investigation, we're going against the very nature of ego. But that it is not impossible, because though the nature of ego is to attend to things other than itself, that is not our nature, because we remain very happily in sleep without attending to anything other than ourselves. So attention to that anya natam, that attention to things other than ourselves, that is the nature of ego. That is why vairagya is so important, because Bhagavan defines the vairagya as not attending to anything other than ourselves. So it is so important to give up attending to all other things. Generally, we as ego, we are so accustomed, because it's our nature as ego, we are so accustomed to attending to things other than ourselves. When we are first asked to attend to ourselves, it seems a little abstract. A lot of people have difficulty grasping. How can I attend to myself? I don't find anything such as myself, because we are not attending to any object. We are attending to a subject. We're not attending to that which is perceived, but to that which is perceiving it. Though we ourselves are not an object, we are always aware of ourselves. But self-awareness is the one constant in our experience. Even when we're aware of nothing else in sleep, we're still aware of ourselves. So in waking, dream, and sleep, the one thing that we constantly experience is self-awareness. So that's even, I mean, there's never a moment when we are not aware of ourselves. Generally, we neglect our self-awareness because we're more interested in other things. So self-awareness is like the background. Bhagavan often compared it to the screen on which the pictures appear. So without the screen, you can't project a picture. You can't project a picture into empty space. So you need the screen. That screen is the fundamental self-awareness. That's our real nature. It's on the screen of self-awareness that all other things are projected. So rather than attending to any of the pictures on the screen, that's any phenomena, we need to attend to the screen itself. That is, I mean, that's just an analogy. In this case, rather than attending to anything that appears or disappears, we need to attend to that which is permanent. That is the fundamental self-awareness. But it's not, it's, when we talk in language has developed to describe phenomena, basically, to describe our experience in this phenomenal world. So when we are talking about something non-objective, non-phenomenal, our own self-awareness, the language is inadequate. So we have to understand, we have to recognize the limitations of the language and see what is beyond it, what it's pointing at. So when we are told to attend to ourself, it's not that ourself is an object that we attend to. We are always self-aware. There's never a moment that we're not self-aware. But generally, because of our interest in other things, we're negligently self-aware. The practice is to be attentively self-aware. So we're not attending to anything like an object, but we are just being attentive to our own self-awareness. The words don't capture it properly, but they do point us in the right direction. So we have to think deeply and try to put it into practice. And then what Bhagavan is pointing at becomes clear to the extent that we attempt it and we practice it, and it becomes clear to us. If you've never ridden a bicycle, I can explain to you all about riding a bicycle, about balance, about center of gravity and everything. But there's only one way to learn to ride a bicycle, actually. No amount of theory is going to be sufficient. Maybe a little theory you need to start you off. Once you've grasped that little theory, the only way to progress, to actually learn to ride a cycle, is to get on one and to fall many times. Likewise, the only way to learn self-investigation, the words point to us in the right direction, but to learn it, we have to try.
Yes, so when I'm trying, like right now, I'm trying to abide. I'm trying to know who I like. So when I say I, is
Yes.
it, so I'm turning,
Yeah.
do I say
if I say an object, if I say bus, a certain object comes to your mind. If I say apple, something comes to your mind. If I say tree, something comes to your mind. When you say I, it denotes a certain something. You're referring to something. What we're essentially referring to is our self-awareness. But because we mix up our self-awareness with awareness of this body, we're referring to this body as I, or this mind as I. But who is it who is aware of this body? Who is it who is aware of this mind? I am. So what is that I? Who am I? That is, we have to go deep, deep within, as Bhagavan says in this verse.
So operating as a subject, in an art of this, operating as a subject is right.
Our deep
But
self is
even the subject is not our goal, because the subject comes into existence along with objects. Objects appear because we rise. The subject is ego. There's no subject in sleep, because subject is subject only in relation to objects. So we have the doorway back to what we actually are is through this subject, through the ego. Because all other things are, all phenomena are jada, they're devoid of awareness. Ego is a mixture of chit and jada, of awareness and non-aware adjuncts. This body is not aware. The thoughts that constitute our mind are not aware. But there is something in this, there is an element of awareness in this ego. That element of awareness is the doorway through which we have to go to find out the pure awareness that we actually are. If you've gone deep into a dark cave, there's only one way out. There's a string that you've come with. You have to follow that string back the way you came. That string is the string of awareness. So we have to that is our guide back to the source from which we came. As Bhagavan said, it's like the ascent for the dog. If the dog has got separated from its human friend and wants to find again, it will just follow the scent until it finds it. So also this ego, or this mixed awareness, I am this body, the awareness element there, that is the scent that we have to follow. And if we follow this scent, it will take us back to our source.
And Michael, like you said, I mean, nobody denies their existence. Like even right now, I know that I am.
Yeah.
But I don't know anything about the I am more than that. I know that I am. That's it.
Yeah. It's very clear that we are, but it's not very clear what we are. So in order to know what we are, how do we know what we are? The only way to know what we are is to investigate ourselves, to attend to ourselves.
So what we are has it has some nature, it has a quality to it. Is that what you're saying? What we are is...
Well, yeah, it's beyond, it's difficult to say, because in a sense it's beyond all qualities. But if you call awareness a quality, but awareness is not actually a quality, awareness is the substance. But if we, from our present point of view, awareness seems to be a quality. So if you take that quality and follow that quality, it will take you back to the substance, the one real substance, which is pure awareness.
The screen has to be aware of itself like that.
So, sorry?
The screen.
The screen has to be aware of itself, yes, yes. But yeah, but this is where analogies fall down, because in the case of the cinema, the spectator is separate from the screen. So this is where words and analogies all fail. We've got to take what is useful from that. But yes, in a sense, the screen has to be aware of itself. The snake has to look at itself to see that it's not a snake but just a rope.
Thank you.
Michael, I read a poem that said, or a prose poem that said, knowing only knows itself. Real knowing.
Yes, yes.
Your awareness.
Yes.
Does it feel an object? It doesn't.
Yeah. Knowing there means awareness. Real awareness doesn't know anything other than itself. It's not awareness of something, it's just awareness.
Doesn't do anything.
In sleep, we are not aware of anything, are we? But we are aware nevertheless. So there's a difference between awareness and awareness of. Because awareness of has an object. Awareness itself need have no object. We cannot be aware of anything without being aware. But we can be aware without being aware of anything.
Awareness of practice.
Michael,
Yes.
how do we grow in this conviction that the breath, the body, these are all phenomena, projection, nothing more than a projection?
Yes.
I mean, that seems the crux of it. It's just, it is so ingrained in our psyche
Yes.
that it's very difficult to knock it out.
Yes. When we are dreaming, everything we experience in a dream is just our own thoughts.
Understood.
But so long as we are dreaming, it all seems to be real. Why? Because what we are seeing is a dream world. But we are seeing ourselves as a part of that dream world. We are seeing ourselves as a body in that dream. Because we are real, when we experience the body as ourself, we experience the body as real. And since the body is part of the whole world seems to be real. So it all seems real so long as we're dreaming. When we wake up, our identification with that dream body is broken. As soon as that identification with that dream body is broken, that dream body no longer seems to us to be real. So the whole world doesn't seem to be us to be real. So as soon as we wake up, we recognize, oh, that was just my own mental projection. But while we're experiencing it, it doesn't seem to be our mental projection. It seems to be existing independent of our perception of it. This is Maya. Always when we experience it, when we are experiencing a dream, the dream seems real. We are now experiencing a dream, but because it's our current dream, it seems to us to be real. And all other dreams seem to be just dreams.
So mystics in all religions have this sense of awareness, universal awareness, that you are one with the universe or one with everything. And
that is not our goal.
that is not our goal.
Because the universe is just an appearance. It appears in waking, and well, one universe appears in waking, another universe appears in dream. But what we are seeking is not universal awareness, but pure awareness. Because universal awareness means there's awareness plus a universe.
Mm-hmm. So this is nothing else.
This whole universe is nothing but ourself. But so long as we see the universe, we don't see ourselves. In the third paragraph of Nāṇa, Bhagavan says, if the mind, which is the cause for all awareness of other things and all activity ceases, jagat drishti, that's perception of the world, will cease. And then he gives an analogy. Just as unless awareness of the imaginary rope goes, awareness of the rope, which is the adhisthana, that's the base or foundation, will not arise, unless perception of the world, which is a fabrication, departs, seeing one's own, seeing swarupa, that's swarupa darshana, which swarupa is the adhisthana, so darshana of swarupa, which is the adhisthana, will not arise. So in order to see ourselves as we actually are, which is what is meant by swarupa darshana, we have to cease seeing the world, because so long as we see the world, we have risen as ego. And rising as ego means seeing ourselves as something other than what we actually are, because ego always identifies itself as a body. So we cannot see the world and see ourselves as we actually are. In the next paragraph, Bhagavan says that also. He says, Ahayal jagam tondram podu surupam tondradru. That means, therefore, when the world appears, swarupa, our own nature, does not appear. And then he says, swarupam tondram prakasikam podu. That means when swarupa appears or shines, implying when we know ourselves as we actually are, jagam tondradu, the world will not appear. So we cannot see ourselves and the world. So this idea of universal awareness, there may be some state in which there's some sort of identification with the whole universe. I mean, all sorts of, in a dream, everything is possible. So all these so-called mystic experiences, they're all part of a dream. Bhagavan says in verse 20 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, I think 20 or 21, seeing God without seeing oneself is seeing a manomayamam kakshi, a mental vision. So experiencing universal consciousness, that's all, it's all mental, because the universe itself is mental. It's a projection of the mind. So we need to go beyond universal consciousness. In fact, we can forget universal consciousness. It's this present consciousness, this present awareness. What is this? Who am I? That's what we need to be concerned about. If others are interested in universal awareness, let them enjoy universal awareness. We want real awareness. And real awareness is only pure awareness. Awareness devoid of universe, that is real awareness.
Okay, even thinking about this makes me shiver. As long as I was thinking about all of this in an intellectual way, it was okay.
Yeah.
But as I am going into who am I, and I've gotten to the searching for I and found that there's nothing there, there's been a great deal of fear. As I'm going in and searching, when I discovered, well, there's really nothing there.
How can you say there's nothing there? Because you must be there in order to say there's nothing there. What you are seeking is yourself.
Okay.
You cannot be nothing. You are not a thing, but you are not nothing.
Okay. And so that's I think that's where I'm
Wow.
stuck.
Did you see what we said?
Yeah.
You're not a
I'm
thing,
not a
but you're
thing.
not nothing.
I'm not nothing.
Subject.
So,
Not object.
And so, okay, so I'm, what do I need to get to that now? Because when I go in, and it used to be the mind's doing all this stuff, but the mind is not doing all this stuff. I'm just like in a space or something. I'm just like in a space.
Okay, if you want to retrieve pearls from the bottom of the ocean, pearls that are deep down in the ocean, what do you need? You need to tie a stone to your waist. Likewise, Bhagavan says we need that vairagya. We need that freedom from desire. The only thing that is obstructing us from going deep within is our desires and attachments. We are not yet willing to let go. There's nothing easier than knowing ourselves. If we're able to know other things, why can't we know ourselves? The reason it seems to us to be difficult to know ourselves is we are not yet willing to let go.
So that's that. So that's the fear.
that's the fear. That's what you're calling it,
Yes.
as fear,
Yeah.
because
Okay.
you're just not wanting to let go.
Yes.
Things,
But
things that are right.
in order to be willing to let go, what we require is love. It's only by the love to know ourselves that we can cultivate that willingness to let go. To the extent that we love to know ourselves, to that extent we will be free of desires for other things. To the extent that we have desires for other things, to that extent we don't yet have sufficient love to know ourselves.
Okay, so the feeling of falling into a deep hole is just the fear, and I'm not.
Yes.
I just feel like I'm falling. Oh! And that's what it feels. I get to a point, and it feels beautiful, but then it starts to feel like, oh, I'm falling into a deep hole.
Yeah. That is our unwillingness to let go.
Okay.
Because in order to be as we actually are, what we now seem to be is ego. As this ego, we need to dissolve entirely into our source. We need to dissolve back into pure awareness. In order to dissolve in pure awareness, we need to let go of awareness of all other things. We need to let go of that which is aware of all other things. In other words, this ego. So it's a complete renunciation is needed. We must be willing to let go of everything, not just temporarily. We're all happy to let go of everything every night when we go to sleep, because we're tired and we just don't have the energy to continue projecting this dream. But next morning we wake up fresh and we're all set to go again until we become tired. So we are willing to let go because we believe we're going to come back the next morning full of energy.
And the willingness to let go.
So we're not afraid of sleep, but we are, if you were told, if you go to sleep now, you'll never wake up again, you wouldn't want to, you'll be afraid of going to sleep because we still have that attachment. So if we follow this path deeply enough, we will fall asleep in such a way, but we will never wake up. But that is where falling asleep in that way is the true awakening. That is, we will be eternally asleep to phenomena and awake to our real nature. Now we are asleep to our real nature and awake to phenomena.
So, Michael, Kathy asked a question. So will that willingness to let go come with practice?
Yes.
Yes.
That's the whole purpose of the practice. Because why that willingness to let go is cultivated by the practice? Because when we are practicing, at each moment we have a choice. Either we attend to ourselves or we attend to other things. When we attend to other things, we are nourishing and sustaining our vasanas, our liking to attend to those other things. When we attend only to ourselves, we are nourishing the sat vasana, the liking to attend only to ourselves, to be as we actually are. and we are thereby weakening the Vishaya vasanas. So at each moment in our life, we have a choice. Either we attend to ourselves or we attend to other things. So the more we choose to attend to ourselves, even if little by little by little, we are weakening our desires and attachments to attend to other things. And though it may seem at first that we're making very, very slow progress in this path, almost no progress at all, but every little, Bhagavan said, every small effort you make in this path, no small effort you make in this path will ever go in vain. Bhagavan said, if you take one step towards God, God will take 10 steps towards you. So we have to do our little bit. We have to try the best we can. God will take care of, Bhagavan will take care of everything else.
Okay, I guess I'm just getting impatient. All right. Thank you, Michael.
Right.
So, practice is key.
Yeah, yeah.
The vairagya, the desirelessness.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Hi, Michael. Namaskar.
Hi. Namaskaram.
Earlier, you said that when Bhagavan experiencing the self-realization, he was not actually an acting death, but he was lifeless. His body was lifeless. So how do we know for sure that he was lifeless at that time? Is it not just a cult or just a mere myth?
So, sorry, I didn't quite catch that question.
So how do we know for sure that Bhagavan his body was lifeless when he was experiencing the self-realization?
Because that's what he said. I mean, he clarified that because it was written in various books that Bhagavan enacted death. Bhagavan later clarified, no, it wasn't enacting. It's actually, the body was actually dead for about 20 minutes. And that wasn't the only time that his body died. In many books, they write about what was popularly called for a long time Bhagavan's second death experience. That's in 1912. Bhagavan, along with Pariniswami and others, had gone to Pachamankhoil. That's a temple on the northeast side of the hill, because there's a nice tank there. They had a swim and a bath there, and they had an oil bath. And after having their oil bath, they were returning back to Virupaksha cave, and it was a very hot day, hot sunshine. So Bhagavan started feeling faint, and once or twice he leaned against something so as not to fall down. And then at a certain point, when they came to a big rock called Amaiparai, that's the tortoise rock, it's called, Bhagavan, finding himself to be very unsteady, he sat down on that rock, and he died. The body started turning, became pale, lifeless blue almost. And one of the two people were with him at that time, Pariniswami and Vasudeva Sastri. Vasudeva Sastri was at that time a very young boy, so he didn't really know what was happening. But he saw how alarmed Pariniswami was, so Vasudeva held Bhagavan and was weeping. And after about 15 or 20 minutes, Bhagavan suddenly came to life again. Bhagavan said he was aware of it all, the body becoming lifeless, and then suddenly, as if from the right side to the left side, a shock went, and his heart started beating again. That was recorded by P.V. Narasimha Swami in Self-Realization, and it was, and after that, people started referring to that as Bhagavan's second death experience. But after many years, Bhagavan said that wasn't the second one, that was the last one. He said between 1896, when he was 16 years old and had that first experience in Madurai, and that time in 1912, on a number of occasions, his body just became lifeless. His heart and breathing just stopped. usually for about 15-20 minutes, and then it suddenly started again. But that was the only time, that incident in 1912, that was the only time it was noticed by others. Other occasions, only Bhagavan knew about it, no one else knew about it. And Bhagavan said that happened to be the last time it happened.
Yes, go ahead.
Not that that has any particular significance, but it just happened. We don't know why, or I mean, we don't need to explain it, but we know in the case of that, when it first happened in Madurai, the reason his body became lifeless was because he so keenly turned his mind within in order to find out what he really is. And because that keen turning of his mind within, the body just became lifeless. No breath, no heartbeat, nothing.
That's why it's so difficult to explain consciousness, right? All the research in the world is not able to explain how the life comes for a fetus, for example.
Well, all attempts to explain consciousness, we think consciousness needs explaining in terms of other things. But consciousness, if we understand that consciousness awareness is the one fundamental reality, it is what is. It is Uḷḷadu. It is Sat. Chit is Sat. How can you explain what is? You can explain one thing in terms of another thing. How a child is born, we can explain, because we can explain in terms of because the parents came together and the mother became pregnant and the child is born. We can explain things but are caused by other things. But that which is the original, the one real substance, how can that be explained? Because it has no cause. It is what is. So we cannot. Consciousness cannot be explained, and consciousness need not be explained. The only thing we need to explain is how everything else appears. And Bhagavan gives a simple explanation. Because you rise as ego, everything else appears. When you don't rise as ego, nothing appears. Therefore, don't rise as ego and be happy.
So, using this analogy of the pearl diver, Michael.
Yes.
How do you know that you are approaching the pearl? Like, are there any signs that you get? Or
well, we're not looking for any signs. We're looking for ourselves. And to the extent that other things withdraw into the background, recede into the background of our awareness, to that extent we are diving deep within. When our mind is fully withdrawn from all other things, when we're aware only of ourselves, that is reaching the pearl. And at that moment, because we are aware of ourselves as we actually are, ego is destroyed forever. Because if you once see, so long as you see a snake, you're afraid. But in order to free yourself from that fear of the snake, you have to look at the snake very carefully. When you look at it carefully enough, you'll see it's a rope. Once you've seen it's a rope, you can never again mistake it to be a snake.
and do you become different? I mean, what is that? You gain anything, or
you don't gain anything? You lose everything. But losing everything is the ultimate gain. Why you don't gain anything? Because you're already that. But in a sense, so in actual fact, we're not gaining anything because there's nothing for us to gain. We are losing everything unwanted. Getting rid of everything unwanted is all that is required. But getting rid of everything unwanted reveals what is always present. So in that sense, in a certain sense, we can say we're gaining everything. Everything there means the only thing, the only real thing, which is ourself.
So in the pearl analogy, the pearl is something desirable. It's something
Yes, yes.
good. So,
Yeah. For the pearl divers, that's their livelihood.
okay. So we do gain our
Your awareness. So the pearl here is your own awareness.
okay.
Yes.
And it is
You yourself are the pearl. Bhagavan says Atma Muttu. Atma Muttu means the self pearl. The pearl that is yourself.
Ananda itself, Satchidananda. So like when I wake up, like I feel my ego to be waking up. And what I'm trying to get at is the self, I think what Kathy said also, the self, the root self itself seems to be very weak, and the ego seems to be something that's doing everything. So that weak self, the real self, will it become strong enough to overcome the ego?
But what you actually are, your real nature, your real self, is immutable. It never changes. The whole issue is about ego. The ego is very strong in attending to other things because it has cultivated its Vishaya vasanas. But that strength to attend to other things is weakness in the spiritual path, because this ego, which is able to go outward so fast, isn't able to go back within, because it's because of the strength of its vasanas. So we need to weaken the vasanas and thereby gain the strength to remain as we actually are. But in all this process, what we actually are remains ever unchanged. It's untouched by any of these things. So all this spiritual practice is only for ego. And the end of spiritual practice is the dissolution of ego. When ego is finally dissolved, what actually is, that your real nature remains as it always was.
And can't function by itself. I mean, can it?
It doesn't function at all. It has no function. It just is. Functioning means doing. Doing is the nature of ego. It's not the nature of your real of Atmaswarupa, your real nature. You are just being. You're just Sat, Chit, Ananda. There's no function there. Just being as you are.
And the Satchidananda means
Sat means what is. That you yourself are Sat. Your being is Sat. Chit means awareness. Ananda means happiness. So if you know your being as it actually is, if you're aware of yourself as you actually are, that is the state of supreme happiness. Because happiness is yourself. You yourself are infinite happiness.
So if you can destroy your ego, you can stay at that state forever.
Yes, once we are aware of what we actually are, ego will be destroyed forever. And then we eternally remain as we actually are. Even now you are as you actually are. But it's seemingly obscured by your rising as ego. That's why we investigate the ego. When we find that there's no such thing at all, then things remain as they always were. Nothing has ever happened. All happenings, all functioning, it's all only in the view of ego.
And the ego is doing so many things throughout the day. It doesn't. It's like if you let go of the ego, can you ever function again, or in this world?
That which is functioning is ego.
And so
when ego investigates itself and finds that there's no such thing, then there's no one left to function, no one with any need to function. Because the world doesn't exist except when you see it. It's like saying, if you wake up from dream, can you continue functioning in your dream? Obviously, when you wake up from a dream, the dream has come to an end. It's finished.
The question doesn't arise. And that is what is referred to as inaction in action, right? I mean, after the ego is gone, you could be doing things mechanically.
Well, even that is in whose view?
That is only the view of others.
Of others. But where are the others when you in sleep? Where are the others? It's only in waking that we have others. So in jnana there are no others. When Bhagavan said the actions of the jnani are in the view of others, it's because we now take ourselves to be one of those others. We now, in our view, Bhagavan is a person just like us, so he seems to do actions, he answers questions, he writes poems, he cuts vegetables, he goes for a walk. All these actions, because we take Bhagavan to be that body, that's in our view. But when we wake up, we will see that Bhagavan was never that body and we were never this body. There's what is, was what always is, alone is.
And one last thing, you used an analogy of riding the bicycle, right?
Yes.
So how do you know you've started to ride it? You started to ride the bicycle. How do you know that you're making progress towards that?
You will find out. This is the path of knowledge. It's a path of awareness. The more we turn our attention towards ourselves, the clearer this path will become to us. So if we are following this path correctly, there will be no doubts about whether we're following it correctly. We may not be, none of us are following it perfectly, because we need to follow this path perfectly for just one moment. If we follow it perfectly for one moment, the story is over. So, but now we are perfecting our practice. And it's very, very clear as we go on with our practice that our practice is getting refined, is getting deeper. That is, it's something that is just, everything becomes clearer. The more we put this into practice, the clearer things become. Because clarity comes with light. What is the light that illumines the mind? That is our own self-awareness. That is the source of all light. So when we're turning our attention back to the source of all light, we are clarifying the mind more and more. So everything becomes clearer and clearer and simpler. But Bhagavan's teachings actually are extremely simple. But why people have such difficulty grasping them? Because of the complexity of our mind. So, but the more we put it into practice, the clearer and the more we will recognize and relish the simplicity of his teachings. Because in simplicity lies clarity, in complexity lies confusion. And the truth is very, very simple. The truth is Advaita, not two. What can be simpler than not two?
It's extremely simple, and the people find it. I've seen people argue about, one time somebody was arguing, it can't be that simple,
Yes. But because we are not willing to let go.
Yes.
We are afraid of simplicity. Because the ego thrives on complexity. Nānabam jnanam ajnanamam, Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. That is, awareness of multiplicity is ignorance. And that awareness of multiplicity is the very nature of ego. So ego isn't really willing to let go of its awareness of multiplicity. It's clinging fast to its ignorance. Because without ignorance, it cannot survive. Ego itself is ignorance.
Yeah, sure.
Michael, I got a question for you.
Yes.
So if we don't, even if we give up one thought, so if you don't get attached to the thoughts are coming, even if you are successful in not getting attached to a single thought, will that have a long-term, long-lasting effect? Which means that itself is your progress towards spirituality.
Yes. As Bhagavan said, every step we take on this path, we're getting one step closer to our goal. But it's not a matter of letting go of one thought after another, thoughts one by one. But the problem is not so much the thoughts as the strength of the thoughts. The thoughts get their strength from the passion behind them, from our will. So we are weakening our outward going will. Our outward going will is what is called Vishaya Vasanas. So the more we follow this practice, the more the Vishaya Vasanas are getting weakened. It's not that we're just killing one Vishaya Vasana at a time. Metaphorically, we can say that, but actually what is happening, every Vishaya Vasana is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Or we can say, probably a better way of expressing it, the total strength of our Vishaya Vasanas is getting weaker. The Vishaya Vasanas are our enemy. The commander-in-chief of that enemy is ego. So the more we, Bhagavan gives that analogy of so long as they're enemies in the fort, they will continue coming out. If you cut them down one by one, though he said they're one by one, we're not actually cutting them. It's not actually one by one. Because he's using an analogy. It's actually the total strength of that army of Vishaya Vasanas is getting weaker and weaker and weaker. May still have the same number of soldiers, but each soldier is losing his strength.
Thank you.
It's very encouraging.
In all these things, a lot of the things Bhagavan has explained to us, he's explained in metaphorical language. We have to go behind the words to understand what it means. To really understand Bhagavan's works deeply, we can discuss them and think about them. That all helps. That's a process called manana. But to really understand them clearly and deeply, that understanding comes only with practice. The more we practice them, the clearer they will become. So manana, the Sravana and manana are necessary. But the real clarity comes from, or the deep clarity comes from the nididhyasana, from the actual practice of self-investigation. And the more we practice self-investigation, the deeper our manana will become. The deeper and simpler. Because with simplicity comes clarity, and with clarity comes depth.
And you recommend self-investigation. You don't recommend, Bhagavan didn't recommend any practices. It's just the act of.
Well, Bhagavan of his own accord didn't recommend anything. He didn't even recommend self-investigation because he has to. So self-investigation is necessary to get rid of self-ignorance. But in Bhagavan's view, there is no self-ignorance. So Bhagavan of his own accord didn't give any teachings. Only when people come to him and ask, then he will say, for whom is this problem? Investigate yourself, find out what you are, and all these problems will be solved. For people who were not ready to accept this, and they would say, oh, Bhagavan, can I not attain this by japa, or can I not attain this by pranayama? I say, oh, yes, 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 that's also good. So, because Bhagavan's not going to tell you to practice self-investigation if you don't want to practice it. But if you want to do something else that is going to lead you gradually to a point where you will gain the liking to follow, to practice self-investigation, then he'll encourage you in your own way.
But to get
But
to the
Bhagavan did make it very clear, the one solution to all problems, the only solution to all problems, is self-investigation. Sometimes he also calls it self-surrender, but actually they're one and the same. Because we cannot surrender ourselves without investigating what we actually are. Because the self we have to surrender is ego. And this ego is a wrong knowledge about ourselves, a false self-awareness, an awareness of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. So it's only by self-investigation that we can effectively surrender this ego. So that is the one infallible solution. All other paths are useful to the extent that they lead us to this path. But this is the only path that will lead us to the final goal. Bhagavan said there are many roads leading to the city, but there's only one gate to enter, and that gate is self-investigation. It doesn't matter what road you come from. Sooner or later, you have to leave. When you come to the city, you leave behind all the other paths and you go to the one gate to enter it. Without leaving behind the road, you cannot enter the city.
Any other questions? Thank you. Does she have any questions? You have a question?
Yeah, Michael, just curious. So it seems like the self, the who I am, is helpless or choiceless or unwittingly rising as the ego.
No. What you actually are never rises as ego. What rises, only ego rises as ego.
But it rises from myself.
What?
It rises from who I am.
It rises from what you actually are, yes, yes.
So it seems like what I actually am wants to rise as ego, or it's helpless or choiceless, or no.
Only all the wants is only for ego. But if you investigate this ego, you will see there's no such thing. So there never was any desire to rise. But what we actually are, our real nature, Atma Swarupa, Brahman, whatever you call it, it has no desire for anything. It's immutable. It cannot be touched by anything. All the problems are only for ego. The problems are only for ego, and the root of all the problems that ego is experiencing is ego itself. So ego needs to surrender itself in order to solve all its problems. And it can surrender itself only by investigating what it actually is.
So all the problems, all the joys, only the ego, like God is oblivious to the ego, like my state of despair or my state of joy.
Yes and no. That is, if by God you mean what you actually are, yes.
Yes.
If by God you mean, but when we rise as ego, we we see the world and everything, and we want an explanation for that. We explain it all in terms of God.
No, when I say God, I mean who we actually are.
Yeah.
It has no relation to my life story or my ups and downs or anything.
It has no relation except the fact that it is what you actually are. But as ego, we're slowly gaining a taste to follow this path and return to our source. What is it that has created this taste in us? That thing that has created this taste in us is what is called grace. What is grace? Grace is nothing but the love that your real nature has for itself. In other words, that you as you actually are have for yourself as you actually are. That is what grace is. Now, having seemingly risen as ego, we have separated ourselves from our real nature. Seemingly, not really, because we can never obviously be separated from what we actually are, but we seem to have separated ourselves. And all the love that we have for ourselves, since we are happiness, the love we have for happiness manifests in ego as desire for other things, which it thinks will get happiness, give it these other things which it thinks are sources of happiness, which will provide happiness to it according to its belief. But so it deludes itself going outwards. But underlying all that is this fundamental love, the love to be happy. That love to be happy is the love that our real nature has for itself. That love to be happy is our real nature. So that is what functions as grace, slowly cultivating in us the liking to go back within. Because we are seeking happiness outside. No matter how much we seek happiness outside, we're always disappointed. We may achieve all we want. We may have lots of money, we may have fame, we may have everything, but we're still not satisfied. Nothing in this world can satisfy us because we are infinite happiness. So we can never find satisfaction in finite things. So we're getting more and more frustrated. We're getting more and more, and slowly we begin to understand that happiness doesn't lie in external things. So we become willing to let go. So this is all the working of grace that is happening. So in a sense, our real nature is helping us, but it's helping us without doing anything. It's helping us just by being that love for happiness. That love for happiness is what is driving all our actions and what ultimately drives us back to this spiritual path to return home. Because home alone is happiness. Home means what we really are.
Will it be a little easier to understand if we think that we are entrapped in our own desires and expectations, and the process of self-investigation or self-atma-vichara is a process of eliminating those desires and expectations,
yes,
and getting up those entrapments?
Yes. But we are not really trapped. We seem to be trapped. But what we really are is never trapped by anything. It is always as it is. So even our desires are unreal. Even the one who has desires, namely the ego, is unreal. That's why we investigate this ego. Any other spiritual path, we take ego for granted because it's ego that does it. Only in the path of self-investigation, we are questioning the very basis of all these things. The basis of all these things is ego. Now we are investigating, what is this ego? Who am I? So that's why Bhagavan said this is cutting up the very root of the whole tree of samsara.